Well, hello, and welcome to Gallifrey's Most Wanted. I'm Ross Aiken. I'm Old Who.
You should become like them.
And I'm Jason Miller. I'm middle-aged Who.
We shall become out.
Wait a minute, how old are you?
I'm going to be 50 in a few months.
Okay, as Vic said when I said I was middle-aged at 50, she said, you ain't fucking living to 100. You might. You probably did not abuse your body the way I did in the 80s.
I have this running gag with my teenager, and she always says, you're in your late 40s. I'm like, no, I'm in my mid-40s. And when I was 46, that was fine, but I keep extending the definition of mid-40s. So right now, 49 is mid-40s, so I'm still in my mid-40s as far as she's concerned.
Yeah, well, my wife said the other day, my wife goes, you're going to be 60 next year. And I said, no, my next birthday's 59. And she went, yeah, that's this year. Next year, you're 60. I was like, well, you know what? Kiss my ass. All right, folks. As us two leaning into geriatrics Who fans are going to do, we are going to discuss the last of Classic Who. This is Survival from, 1986?
1989.
89. Yeah, I have my About Time. I'd watched this about a year ago, so watching it again, it was like, I could have done this from memory. But I'm glad I watched it again. So we're going to jump to the synopsis from the program guide by Jean-Marc Léofficer, and we'll be right back. Survival, Serial 7P. Writer, Rona Moreau. Director, Alan Waring. Script editor, Andrew Cartmel. Producer, John Nathan Turner. Originally aired November 22nd, 1989 to December 6th, 1989. The Doctor takes Ace to Perryvale because she wants to look up her old friends, but most of them seem to have disappeared. They have been transported by the cat-like Kitlins to the planet of the Cheetah People, descendants of an ancient race which has reverted to savagery and has the ability to teleport through space. The Doctor and Ace are eventually transported to the planet. Ace teams up with Midge and two other old friends while the Doctor meets the Master, who has drawn him there because he needs the Doctor's help to escape from the doomed planet, whose symbiotic nature is causing the Master to turn into an animal. Midge lets his animal side overcome him, and the Master uses him to teleport to Earth. Ace, who has almost succumbed to the attraction of a cheetah woman, Kara, gains the same ability and takes the Doctor and the others back to Perryville. There, the Master uses Midge and his friends to go after the Doctor, but Midge dies. The Master kills Kara, who reverts to human form. Overtaken by his animal nature, he drags the Doctor back to the disintegrating cheetah planet. The Doctor is teleported back to Earth when he makes the decision to refuse to fight. This was the final serial of the original Doctor Who, but not the last time I will be using the Doctor Who Program Guide, the complete guide to every Doctor Who story by Jean-Marc Léofficer. All right, if you haven't gotten it, please do. I've been telling you that for years. Well, as you're a guest in this first episode of changing guest hosts on the show, I'm going to let you go first. What is your take on this? And I have a general idea what it is because you shared that with me when I asked you to come on.
I will give the preface first, and then I'll jump right into it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a 2-month podcast backlog. I have to be very choosy about what I listen to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not all Doctor Who. I have politics podcasts, I have baseball podcasts, I have fiction podcasts. I have many fandoms, so I have to be very selective as to what I listen to, and that means I'm missing a lot of good Doctor Who content. So I have to be pretty ruthless in what is going to cause a show to be unsubscribed. I am very much not into hate watches. I am not into shows where every single episode is negative about a particular series or era. That's one of the reasons why you are still in my heavy rotation, because you always find something positive and unexpected to say.
Yeah.
And even when
criticism
you're critical,
criticism of art is not meant as in you criticize it. It means you critique it. You talk about the good and the bad.
Exactly. Even for a story you don't like, you find good things to say.
Wow.
Now, I do not like this story. This is my least favorite story out of the entire classic run of Doctor Who.
God, man, there's some really bad ones, so I really can't wait to hear the reason why you dislike this one, because there's some really universally regarded turds.
Your regular guest, Fraser Gregory, and I have a very long-running mock feud going on Twitter about the Dominators. The Dominators is my bottom 5. But
Yeah.
the Dominators is my bottom 5 because it's a little boring, and the acting is not very good, and the directing is not good. Most classic Who stories that I dislike because they're just poorly made. I had you on my show, Doctor Who Literature. We were both harshing on poor Android Invasion. Those are bad stories because they're bad. The reason I don't like this one, I first saw this when I was a 17-year-old, okay? So this airs on PBS 1990. So I had missed Battlefield and Ghostlight. I don't know why. So I saw Curse of Fenric. It was the first New Who that I'd seen in a year. And then I saw this the following weekend. It was just so cynical and nihilistic. And I've given Survival many chances over the years, and I've got a couple of positive things to say about it. You'll hear it over the next hour. I just find that this is the most cynical and mean-spirited and unhappy Doctor Who. Most Doctor Who stories, you want to live in that world. Even if there's a tragedy, it's usually an emotionally safe space because the Doctor is your lead. So I can watch a story like Legopolis, where there's a lot of death and destruction. I can watch a story like The Massacre, which is based on a horrible event. And I can still come away.
That is a Debbie Downer one. It is one of my favorites. It's one of those ones where I would be over the moon if they found it.
Exactly. But that's so well made, and the dialogue is so good that even as things are falling apart in episode 4, I am just enthused and I'm energized. This one, there's nothing really optimistic for me to latch onto. And what's telling is that when Rona Munro comes back to the show 30 years later, she retells the story. Talking animals, disappearing children, interdimensional rift, but it's optimistic and it has a much more happy and joyful ending. So
I see a lot of bashing on that one, and I actually, as a Scot, I love it, and 2, I think it's an incredibly good episode. It's well written, it's well crafted, and I'm a big fan of that TARDIS team.
Yeah.
I mean that's a really underrated TARDIS team. But I get you, I get the cynical. I have my history with Survival is a roller coaster of love-hate. I will enjoy it one time, and I will despise it for a lot of the same reasons you will. I will go the clunky dialogue, the generic kind of characters, and how one side of the story is better executed than the other in a lot of ways. Like the stuff in modern times is badly shot, uninteresting to look at. The 2 comedians who I don't even know who they are that were big stars that are inserted in, they're not funny. That's always been my problem. The stuff on the Cheetah Planet, at least is good action, and there's peril, which is entertaining. And I really like the Master in this one. This is one of my favorite Anthony Lee performances because he's menacing, and he's got a really good costume. As a design person, I love that costume because his other costume is meh. It's not great because this is in the era of you wear the same clothes every day.
Right.
Yeah, but that it's a nicer costume. And I think he's better in it. I think he's more malevolent. I think it's the first time. Is it the first time he's writing that Sayward's nowhere near it? Or the second time?
I guess if you count Ultimate Foe, the last 2-parter of the Colin Baker era, Eric Sayward wrote half of part 1 of that and then quit while writing part 2, so it was finished up by Pip and Jane. But yeah, this is the only other stories that Eric Sayward didn't touch were Keeper of Traken and Legopolis.
Which are both really good, and he's very good in them. He's terrible I don't think he's served well by Eric Sayward. I don't think anyone served well by Eric Sayward. I mean, I think that's... The more I listen to other people talk about it, I really have seen the flaws, and I kind of agree that he doesn't like the Doctor.
I am just reaching the Eric Sayward era on my show next week. I'm doing The Visitation, which is the first of the Peter Davison novelizations in publication order.
Yeah.
And it's the first story by Sayward, and that story is good, and it gets him the script editor position. I just find that once he takes over, the next 5 or 6 years are full of violent misogyny and over-the-top mayhem.
Yeah.
And again, I like my Who to be emotionally safe, and in Eric Sayward's hands, there's not a whole lot of emotional safety.
No, there isn't. And my last rewatch through, I really was thinking of that, except I did kind of like Peter's last season, because I think quality of how the stories are put together are better. They're dark. They're dark, but, I think overall they're the next one we have to do on this podcast is Peter is King's Demon, and I'd rather have Root Canal.
I love King's Demon.
Oh,
If you haven't slotted a guest, I will be very.
Well, that's always said there. Yeah. My thing is, like, if I want to see a bad Ivanhoe, I'll watch some bad '70s cartoon, because it's kind of what I get from. But I do get you cynical. But I'm not going to come to the. I mean, I'm not going to try to sway you, but I understand why it is very cynical. And I'm going to use a story with Alan Moore, the comic writer, talking about it. In the '80s, pop culture got very dark, especially English pop culture, because they were living in Thatcher's England.
Right.
So there is a level of England sucks. Our home, we live in shitty neighborhoods. Everything's run down and bad, and that's why she hates Perryville, because that was the political outlook of the times. I mean, '89's a little late. When did Thatcher?
I think John Major took over right around this time, I think.
But he's known better. He's just a little more palatable, right wing.
Yeah.
Whatever. But I think that comes off on it, and I also think it's why. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's you," to Perry, and that there's no affection or connection with any of these people. And that's where I have a problem with it. That there should be, even though the kids are beat down and damaged and have been sent to this world and turned into monsters, seeing an old friend and seeing her friends in peril should have had a little more emotional context. Instead of, oh, okay, now what's the next action thing we have to do? They don't spend any time on that, other than showing all the kids as traumatized and not showing how she's there to help them, or how, just seeing a fresh face would change the mood, and then we could get more about, give us a little more about Ace. You're in her hometown.
And she doesn't manage to save anybody. Let me back up on your Thatcher point. So I would have seen this in 1990. What's going on then? I've just grown up under 8 years of Ronald Reagan, who's elected president shortly after my 7th birthday. After Reagan, we get 4 years of George W. Bush. I am growing up on Long Island, which is a at the time, a one-party county, heavily Republican. In fact, Long Island is so right-wing that the congressman representing my old district is one George Santos, if that is his real name, which it isn't.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the American version of Margaret Thatcher, England. I get the nihilism, but you have to have Ace be a transformative character.
Yeah.
If you read the book, which has a lot of deleted scenes that either didn't get filmed or got filmed and got cut, Rona Munro goes back in the novelization, and she kills everybody. Everybody who you think survives on television ends up getting killed in an extra scene in the book. The only character at all who survives is Shrila. Shrila gets to walk off very happily in the middle of part 3, and she survives the novelization too. But what happens in one of the first New Adventures, they come back and they kill her off as a young woman. So nobody gets a happy ending in the story.
Well, are there happy endings in the new adventure novels at all?
Yeah, a lot of them.
Okay, I've never read them, and I still have to finish reading the first one, and I've been trying for over 30 years. Because it's so bad. It's not terrible. I mean, I've read worse Doctor Who novels. It's just this one's really bad. Hold on. I'll put a note. 1251. Edit. Yeah, put my edit notes, because I'm a lazy editor, so I mark when I know I have to cut, so I don't have to look for it.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, but I mean that's it. It's a very cynical. It is a very cynical story. There's not a lot. There's not a lot of meat to it, but they're going for something, And I'm a big cheerleader of the Cartmel era. I think overall, Sylvester's era is an improvement. Most of the stories have really good things to say about them. There are ones that I dislike, but I still kind of like them in my heart, like Paradise Towers. There's something in it that, at least it's fun, and silly. I mean, there's the pool monster is so frickin' stupid, and, but, I have Happiness Patrol, which is, they would try weird things. And then the second season, when it's just him and Ace, the show is, they're so good together.
Yeah.
A dodgy script is fixable.
The two of them are a great pair, and of course, I was a teenager when these stories come to the States. I immediately fixated on Sophie Aldred. Paradise Towers is based on High Rise, which is the most nihilistic black novel you'll ever read. Paradise Towers has a tremendously optimistic ending because everybody comes together on the pool zone to save the resis, the caretakers. Everybody gets together and they team up, and it's got a much happier ending than High Rise ever had. Paradise Towers is great. This one does not have that same finale.
No, and because they didn't know it was going to be the last story, the even in like the watching it like on the DVD or anything where they've had chances to edit it out, you can tell like we're talking and then all of a sudden this is added voiceover because it doesn't match the soundtrack. It's like really bad. And it's a little, I understand it was like, they didn't know, they found out before this aired, I guess is when they found out. Because this isn't the last story they filmed.
I think this was second. Ghostlight was the last one they filmed.
They were in the middle of filming it when they found out the show had been canceled.
Yeah, so they had to come back. It was after they finished, because they probably filmed it in summer if you look at the light quality, and it airs in December. So they would have had about 6 months to have Sylvester literally phone in that final poem.
Yeah, and that's what it sounds like. He did it over the phone. I mean, it's just rough. But yeah, they're part. I mean, I gotta say, I want to say something good about it, and part of it is I really do like the stuff on the Cheetah world. It looks good. Even the mask is a little. You would think that for modern standards, it's actually not bad. It moves when she talks to a point. Fitted on her head. There's always sometimes with Doctor Who masks where they turn their head and the mask turns just a little bit less. Like, is there your nose in your cheek? And Lisa Bowerman gives a good performance under a mask. Mask acting is hard.
What's interesting about this in Doctor Who, and then I want to come back and talk about the costumes, but I want to make this Lisa Bowerman point. Usually in Classic Who, an old companion leaves and a new companion joins in the same story. This is Ace's final televised story, so this is maybe her departure. Who's joining the series? Lisa Bowerman, who plays Kara in this, has spent the next 30 years playing Benny Summerfield, directing Big Finish. She is basically the next companion, so it's amazing that Lisa Bowerman is in this story, and she's been a titanic part of audio Doctor Who for the next several decades.
She's great in the... I've listened to a handful of Benny. I'm at the beginning. I've never really got past the first couple series, but there's some of the later stuff that really intrigues me. But I'm a big Jago and Lightfoot fan.
Ooh, yes.
They're so good. They're just so good. And there's no reason there should be 14 of them and them all be good. I've still got to listen to the last 3 sets. I listened to like 11 sets, 12 sets in like 3 months. It was the only kind of audio I took for a while during the pandemic was Jago and Lightfoot.
And it kept going after Trevor Baxter passed away.
Yeah, they finished up. Yeah, they finished up the stories that he couldn't finish. That was great, and she's great as the maid, bar wench, whatever her profession is.
But this is why you need to read the New Adventures. That's where Benny comes from. So Bernice Summerfield and Big Finish.
And she's very well. I mean, Cornell had a part in picking the actress, so that doesn't hurt.
Right.
So, but yeah, I know that the Big Finish released what Carton, the lost stories of what would have been the next season, but nothing had been completely written, and his idea for the safecracker thief companion.
Yeah.
Those are okay. I kind of like this. They sounded very much like I was listening to late 80s, early 90s Who. So, I mean, that was the point of them. I don't think I could remember them. I think if I listened to them, I would go, oh, yeah, this is this one. But I don't think they stuck to my brain. So you want to talk about, what about costumes? I mean, I said that I like the Master's costume. I really like the Master's costume.
So I agreed to do this on short notice. I think you and I discussed this yesterday. So I didn't have time to watch the whole thing or read the book again. But I watched two things this afternoon before you and I started recording. I watched the Behind the Sofa on the Blu-ray. That's 8 people discussing the story. You have Pete McTighe and Joy Wilkinson, writers for the new series. You have Sophie and Sylvester on the same couch. And then you have Nissa, Tegan, and Polly, Annika Wills, also on the sofa. So 8 of them are watching the story. So 2 of them were there. 2 of them are former companions, and 2 of them are future writers. You're getting the past couch, the present couch, and the future couch. So you have Pete McTighe is basically serving as your audio commentary guy, giving you all the behind-the-scenes facts behind this story. The Cheetah People masks were not supposed to be full masks. And here you have a disconnect between the production team that is trying to make new, stripped-down, lean Doctor Who with none of the mistakes of the past. But you have the design team, oh, this is Doctor Who, so we're going to go over the top with full-on latex masks. It was supposed to be a slight makeup job with feline features on recognizably human faces. It was not supposed to be those enormous Cheetah People. And it's the same thing with Battlefield, which was the season premiere. I think that was the one made right before Survival in production order. With Battlefield, the Destroyer was supposed to be a man in a business suit with slightly blue-tinged features. What does the Destroyer become when the design team gets a hold of him? This enormous, ridiculous, comically latex mask with horns and scales. So, yeah, the Cheetah People were not supposed to look like this. And if I had time to read the novelization, I would give you the description of what Rona Munro envisions.
Yeah.
But I won't be able to do that, unfortunately.
Well, but I don't think they're as bad. I kind of like the Destroyer. I mean, I think they had gotten better with kind of the remote control mask stuff and stuff like that. And I do like Battlefield a great deal. It has a lot going for it. I mean, Nicholas Courtney and Gene Marsh together.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, and it's I like the little tweak that Cartmel and Sylvester do with the Doctor at the beginning of his Dalek story. Is let's just make him a little more aware of what's going on. People want to say the Dark Doctor. He just knows what's going on. The Doctor has matured, I guess, and he's been doing it long enough to when he lands, he has a general idea of what's going on and what he needs to do, and I'll make my companion do it. I think the the Davies Moffat thing of that, what does the Doctor turn the companions into, comes from this, starts here. Because that's not when I forget who tells the Doctor you turn them into soldiers, if it's Missy or Sim's master or whatever. It's not wrong. I always call it the Doctor lands on the planet and him and the local greengrocer stop a revolution. Because that's what he do. He lands in a place where there's trouble and he manipulates the locals to overthrow their oppressors. He's an agitator. It's like people go, he's a pacifist. No, a pacifist will do zero harm. By action or inaction, the Doctor pushes people into doing sometimes violent acts to save themselves.
And I think what you're getting at with the new series is Julian Bleach's Davros in
That's the one, yeah.
Journey's End.
Yeah.
There's a long montage of characters that sacrifice themselves to save the Doctors.
Yeah, and they're canon fodder. I mean, it's a great one. That's why I remember it, because I love him. He is so good as Davros. And I think he just watched Wisher and went, okay, I'll start from this and go. But it's I get that, and and I know the Seventh Doctor novels are, people say I've not read them. I don't think that, because I read the Eighth Doctor novels, the EDAs, and they're not as cynical and as dark. There are some that are darker, because he's in a darker place. They lay it,
Right.
but they're not as, the great manipulator that the Times champion.
Well, 3 of the new adventures are written by Andrew Cartmel, and those are very, very dark. It's the Doctor at his most cynical and manipulative. But not everyone is like that. I'm in the middle of rereading Shakedown right now, which is one of the Terrence Dicks new adventures. And that is, a very bright, joyful, peppy story. Terrence is writing the kind of story that he wants to tell, with private eyes and detectives in outer space and Ogrons. So there's none of that really dark Doctor in a book like Shakedown. And then I'll just give a plug. My most recent episode with our mutual friend Ian Martin dropped today on the We're All Stories in the End podcast, talking about the 8th Doctor adventure Camera Obscura. The 8th Doctor in Camera Obscura is the 8th Doctor at his best. He's trying to save everybody. He's polite. He's life's champion rather than time's champion, to quote John Blum.
Yeah.
Much less dark. Dark.
I love those books. They, I didn't have a TV when they were coming out, when they first started coming out, so they were my Doctor Who. They were like, oh God, they came out over 5 years, 6 years?
97 to 05, like 8 or 9 years. But
oh, wow.
When I was 17 years old, when I watched Curse of Fenric and this on back-to-back weekends, think about what you're like at 17. You're emotionally fragile. My parents were divorced. I was living in a Republican enclave, and I was beginning to realize that I wasn't one of those people politically. When the Doctor is emotionally abusive to Ace at the end of Curse of Fenric, and then, of course, you have one story after another where the 7th Doctor is manipulating Ace into becoming a soldier, that didn't sit right with me. However, I did say that I wasn't going to do a complete hate watch. I actually like part 1 of the story, and I'll tell you why. Part 1 I like when Doctor Who takes place in the real world. Now, not every story can take place in the real world, but I like when not every story is over-the-top sci-fi. That's one of the, well, not complaints, but one of the critiques that I have of the new series, especially the Chibnall era. Every story is loud, every story is noisy. Once in a while, go to Earth, have minimal sci-fi elements. Part 1 of this is, look at what the Doctor is doing. They land, he walks out of the TARDIS backwards. They're walking down the street. They see the older woman staring out concernedly into the street. Her son has gone missing. The car washing bucket has tipped over and the sponge is on the floor. The Doctor picks it up. As they're walking around, the Doctor sees that cat. The first thing he does is he goes into the little grocery store. And yes, I don't think Hale and Pace are very good on this, but the Doctor is buying cat food because he automatically realizes what's going on. And in the background, on the margins, he is setting a trap for the Kitling, so the Kitling will take him to the planet of the Cheetah People so he can meet the real enemy. And for whatever reason, it is so obvious in the little interstitials in part 1 that it's Anthony Ainley. I didn't realize that at age 17. So when they pull back the curtain and it's the Master, I was shocked. So part 1 of this I really enjoyed. It was the rest of it that started to really, really go sour for me that same night.
And I agree. I think why Davies, the modern producers are 3 very different animals. And Davies relies heavily on the real world.
Yeah.
Heavily. And I like it. And I'm a big Moffat fan. He is an actor's writer. People he talks too much. But you know what? He's writing for his actors. He's not writing, people like that. It's wordplay. I'm not a big Mamet fan, but if someone offered me a role in a Mamet play, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
These are fun words to say. There's a rhythm to them. There's, it helps you act. And Chibnall was just wanted to tell story. I really think he was just going, I don't want to do anything of that stuff that the others did before me because that's not me. And I think he was also, there's a thing in TV, and he's not the only, there's a thing in TV, the longer a show is on, the less they want to spend on it.
Yeah.
Okay? It is, because one, you got to give everybody a raise. Union. Everybody gets a raise at the end of a season, and they get more residuals, which you got to pay for. So that's, people, I'm a Star Trek fan, and they canceled Star Trek Discovery at 5 seasons and didn't do a farewell season. Just,
right.
We're done. Because everybody was about to get a raise. And we've got 5 years worth we've got other stuff to do, so we'll take those sets and we're going to do Starfleet Academy set in that time period, and we're good.
Yeah.
We don't have to do our pre-production cost. Yes, went down, but see, that's kind of the. But they never really did real world that well. I think there's more real world, accurate real world in, say, Battlefield, with like the jazz thing and stuff like that. That this is, and all this crazy sci-fi stuff's going on in the background.
Right.
The real people. Like, you get the lady in the car who has no idea that these two old people she thinks they're cosplayers. You know what I mean?
Oh, the Silver Nemesis lady.
Silver Nemesis. It's all happening in the background. The
we
regular.
surely do, honey. We surely
God.
do.
Jesus Christ, man. It's not the worst, but that is a pretty generic. So you'd have to live in Charleston or South Carolina to sound like that, and that would be an affectation, not an accent. I live in Richmond, and we don't really. You have to go to the counties to hear an accent, but we have neighborhood accents, which is weird. So, if you live in Richmond, if you live on the south side of town, it's south side. It's like, what the hell, south side? So, but I get you saying. I would love to like this one as much as I liked it the last time I watched it. I watched it this time going, okay, I enjoyed it a lot last time, and I watched it this time. I said, this kind of slogs down at times. It just kind of stops moving.
Part 2. When you look at the behind the sofa is 31 minutes long. So you would assume 10 minutes of part 1, 10 minutes of part 2, 10 minutes of part 3. No. It's like 13 minutes on part 1, 13 minutes on part 3. They hardly spend any time in part 2 because all it is running around back and forth around the quarry.
Yeah.
And the only part of it that moves is the color-changing paint box, alien, sky, and moon. The action in part 2 is just dull. So not only did I actively dislike the story, but I was bored while hating it, which is an odd vibe.
Well, and I get what it's like the Genesis of the Daleks thing I say throughout, because how many times do you have to go through those tunnels?
Yeah.
It's like the Sarah Jane Dalek one where I saw it in omnibus form, and the black and white episode was cut out, and I never noticed until I saw it when they colorized it. I went, oh, the cliffhanger's the same.
Yeah.
They're in the fucking air ducts. Oh, that's bad. Wow. But then again, the thing is, I didn't see this in episodic form until it came out on DVD. So I always watched it as a film, and it was, when I was rewatching it last night and this morning, I think that's when I got up there and refilled my coffee. It was like halfway through the second episode, and I didn't pause it. I'm like, fucking, nothing's happening. They're chasing each other up and down. 20-year-olds acting as bad teenagers. Midge is. Oh yeah, he's rough. The sergeant's good. I like him.
He's an interesting character. You know who that is? Julian Holloway.
I know the name.
His father, Stanley Holloway, was in My Fair Lady forever.
Oh!
And was in the movie.
Yeah. I know he is.
Julian Holloway.
Get me to the church on time.
His daughter, Julian Holloway's daughter, is Roald Dahl's granddaughter. Roald Dahl would have been his father-in-law.
Okay.
And Julian Holloway is, to my knowledge, the only cast member on Doctor Who also appeared on Beverly Hills 90210.
Okay.
Which I spent a lot of time watching in college. That was one of our guilty pleasures. You don't often get a cross-pollination between the world of Beverly Hills 90210 and Doctor Who, but he is it. He's the nexus point.
Oh my God, that's weird. That. My wife starts watching that. I'm hiding in my office for years. She watched Baywatch during the pandemic. Every Baywatch.
I was a member of the 90210 gang as far as I'm concerned. So.
Well, I can't. My wife watches soap operas and stuff like, not soap operas, but those kind of dramas. She's a big fan of Succession, and I'm like, I don't want to watch a show about rich, shitty white people. Why? Why are we still doing this? Why are we telling stories about these horrible people? Well, it's interesting. No, it's brainwashing. They want you to want to be that, and that's an asshole. And we have this discussion at work sometimes. I got to remind people, it's like, I'm a fucking commie. All right, if I had my druthers, the America would be. I went to get my teeth cleaned, and me and my dental hygienist had a talk about how insurance companies are the great Satan. And they're terrible, shitty people. And my wife is like, you're going to argue. I argue with them. They call and say, we're not doing this. I said, I don't care what you say you're doing. My doctor said to do this, so fucking do it. He's seen me. You haven't. I did that. I had a hernia surgery, and they wanted to call me and say, you're going to have to cancel your surgery. I said, you fuck all, I'm canceling my surgery. The doctor's going to get paid. Don't worry about me. I'm going to go in there, and my doctor is going to get paid by you. Because the doctor that said no can kiss my ass. I was really, the nurse who was talking to me from the insurance company was like, wow. I was like, yeah, I don't care what your quack doctor signed off on. And she was like, well, they're not. Yeah, if they were real doctors, they'd treat patients. They wouldn't be signing no on insurance forms.
Tell you a true story. About 10 years ago, next month, I had an accident, was hit by a train, broke my elbow, needed reconstructive surgery on the elbow. Come home, still recovering, arm in a sling, still on painkillers. A couple of weeks later, I get a notice in the mail from my insurance company. They've deemed that my elbow surgery was not medically necessary because the reviewing doctor hired by the insurance company says you were hemodynamically stable in the emergency room, ergo there was no reason to have elbow surgery. By the way, we have not yet seen your x-ray. I mean, the absolute worst kind of mental gymnastics you have to do when you're a doctor working for an insurance company saying, oh, this elbow surgery was unnecessary, but I haven't seen the x-ray. Hello, get the x-ray first.
Oh, yeah.
That would have answered your question.
And we discuss it at work because one of the guys I work with is a vet, and he has, he's a veteran, a war veteran. So he uses the VA. He has universal health care, and it works. He's at a very good VA hospital, not the nicest. He said he went by, he saw the one in San Francisco and was, wow, this is nice. But ours has, because the hospital I work at is a teaching hospital, they have to supply the local VA with residents. Yeah. And every resident I've ever met said, that's my favorite rotation, is the VA, because the patients say thank you. They, and they understand that people, I used to run room service call center in the hospital for the patients, and my employees would go, why everybody mean? If you're sick enough to be in a hospital and someone is telling you you are not allowed to go home, I don't care how big and bad you are, you're scared. Yeah. Because the doctor's telling you, yeah, you're fucked up, so you're going to stay here. But, see, let's transition this bizarre rant of mine back to Doctor Who. It's like, but back to real world stuff. What disappoints me about this is that you have the opportunity to have them in the real world, and it is incredibly uninteresting. I think, who was the director on this one?
Alan Waring, and he does a really good job because some of the camera angles, when the
but that's what gets me, is some of it's good and some of it's not so good.
Lisa Bowerman doesn't show up until the Part 1 cliffhanger, so Alan Waring is Lisa Bowerman at the beginning of Part 1. The camera goes up high, and you're supposed to be looking down from Lisa Bowerman's point of view. That's really good. The problem is not the directing, but the writing. With the exception of Shrila, every single guest character here is a one-note character meant to tell a political point. There is no sergeant who would ever act like Julian Holloway's character does. There are no shopkeepers who would ever act like Hale and Pace. And then, this is my biggest problem with the cynicism of Part 3 where everybody dies. Julian Holloway's character is killed by Midge. In the new series, you would have a redemption arc. Instead, the McCoy Doctor, the most left-leaning Doctor we've had, makes a 1980s right-wing action hero quip over Holloway's corpse. I mean, hello, that's not my Doctor.
Yeah, that's I agree. And I mean, I grew up around military, and most vets are, I don't know, he would have been, what war he would have been in, because I don't know where they sent people. They sent people to bad places too, other than just the Falklands, because they went to some of the same bad places my dad went to, except Vietnam. Yeah, I was in line for a David Tennant photo, and there's an Australian family, And me and him were the father and me were talking, and he's younger than I am, but I said, yeah, my dad used to have to go to Australia every once in a while. I go, oh yeah, we went to Vietnam with you. Yeah, we're one of the countries that went with you. And I forgot that. Yeah. Yep. He's like, yeah, there's a we have that thing. But no, I get this way in Doctor Who and a lot of science fiction. Military is always stupid, and that bothers me. There are stupid people in the military. Yes, there are military people that make really bad decisions, but it's no greater than any other profession in the world. And most of them really don't like violence for one reason. They've been asked to commit and take part in violence, and they don't like it. They don't glorify it when they get back.
So I hit the off switch by accident on my camera, but I'm still here.
Okay. But still you know what I mean? The real soldiers don't act that way. I mean, unless they're crazy.
There are stupid people in any profession, but the military is a day job. Not everybody fights. There's a lot of administrative support. Not every sergeant is there.
They're the ones where you're going to find
a
dick. Be honest with you. That's where you're going to find the dicks. Growing up around that bureaucracy, some of those people, some of those officers who never went to combat because that's not the type of work they did, and they would only go to combat like you don't get to a colonel without you don't get to lieutenant colonel or major unless you fought.
Yeah.
You don't get there's no one gets to that. There's certain things. My dad he had to go to the Army War College and get his PhD in 10 months. I think if they do it in 10 months, they get a PhD in 10 months.
Wow.
And that was so he would be eligible to be a brigadier general. He had all his combat. And he did, and he was like, fine. And then it took a while because he had pissed off enough people above him that they didn't want to give him his star. And then some of his contemporaries went, you can't say no to him. Yes, he's a lefty fuck. Yes, he pisses you off because he doesn't suffer fools. But he's earned that jewelry. So put it on him. Move on. So, and when he passed, you get a signed certificate from the president.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, guess who signed my father's?
So he died between 2017 and 2021?
He died about 4 months before Joe got elected.
Oh, my condolences.
Yeah, I'm gonna put. I haven't hung it up. I won't hang it up. My stepmother got every one of his children one when he died, and she made these books with these wonderful photographs of us and stuff I had never seen. And she goes, I'm sorry that asshole's signature's on it. I love my stepmother. She's the bomb. But yeah, the characters are all cut out. It's silly. It doesn't make sense. It's bothersome. And I really am sad that this is the last one. And I want to ask you this. Of the final season, we can only pick the 4 from the final season. I would have preferred... Shit. Is Battlefield in this one?
So this is an interesting one because you have production order and then you have running order. Ghostlight is the last one made.
No, that's not a good ending.
This was, I think, the second one made.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good ending. And I love Ghostlight. It's one of my favorites.
I would have gone out with Curse of Fenric. I'll tell you right off the bat. I think it's the best one of the season. It's got the most interesting, complex script. The novelization is the bomb. And at the end of it, Ace dives in the waters of Maiden Point. She dives in a girl, comes out a woman. She and the Doctor walk away. That's your ending.
Yeah, I think you're right. Because that is one that I can watch either the long version. I compared them the last time they were on, and I really don't see other than... And then the Blu-ray, did they have it as a movie format, the special edition? Is that a movie format?
There was a special edition movie format, and Nicholas Parsons does a incredible job. I'll tell you a baseball story. So we're both baseball fans, and I'm not as much of one anymore as I was. 2006, Mets-Cardinals League Championship Series. I still have not gotten over Game 7. It's a 2-run game, bottom of the 9th inning. If the Mets score 3 runs or 2 runs, they win the whole thing. But they need to score. Tony La Russa brings in this rookie pitcher, Adam Wainwright, who ended up having a great career, but that was the very beginning. And he strikes out Carlos Beltron looking on a bad curveball that broke over the strike zone, that if Beltron had just swing, he would have crushed it, but it froze him, and he just stood there like a housefly on the side of the road, and the Mets lose that game and the series. Cardinals go to the World Series, beat the Tigers in 5. That should have been the Mets. Because there was a pitcher named Wainwright on the bump for the Cardinals, I reached down on my shelf and I grabbed the Curse of Fenric DVD and I put it on top of the television because a character named Wainwright dies in that story, and I was hoping that my DVD, my set top on the Upper East Side of Manhattan would somehow transmit itself to Shea Stadium in Queens, 10 miles away, and would have an effect on the actual pitcher in the game. And, of course, real life doesn't work that way, and Wainwright gets that called strike and the Mets lose. Wainwright is an incredible character. He's a self-doubting religious figure. Now, granted, Nicholas Parsons is 30 years older than the character is supposed to be in the novelization, but it's a great performance. You contrast that with Holloway in this story. Holloway is a one-dimensional, playing Sergeant Patterson is a one-dimensional caricature. If they had just given the complexity of Nicholas Parsons and told Julian Holloway, do this,
he would have
maybe
done
you're
it.
looking at a better story.
He would have done it too. And I love that. My big thing about that is, as someone who was original plan out of high school was to become a teacher and a minister. And then I met Southern evangelicals, and I went, bye-bye. I don't want anything to do with Christianity, because most of the Christians I'm meeting nowadays are not practicing it. They're, it's not, God doesn't give you money, But the faith thing about Wainwright and that faith is a power.
Yeah.
Like when the McCoy starts just naming his companions, that's what faith is. It doesn't have to be to God. You have to you have to believe in something unquestionably. And that's hard. So people go, are you anti-religion? I said, no, I don't. I think religion is a good thing. I think anything is good in small doses and for the right reason. If it's something that keeps you centered and healthy, and to think religion can do that, yeah. It's like not all soldiers are bad. Someone goes, well, we shouldn't fight any wars. I said, well, sometimes you do got to punch the bully.
Yeah.
We haven't had a good justifiable war since the Second World War, but there are times where you need to use a stick. Because there are bad people that do bad things, and you have to go and say, well, we're not going to let you do bad things to us. So, but soldier, see, that's back to the sergeant. He would, if he had been in real combat, or you tell us that he was just some desk jockey sergeant who's doing this thinking he's a tough guy, which would have been a terrible trope, but at least been a reason why he was ineffectual.
Yeah.
So, I don't think I hate it as much as, or dislike it, dislike it as much as you do, but this time through there was big chunks of it that made me go, this is really bad.
In the novelization, by the way, Patterson is a police sergeant, not military.
See, that would make more sense. I would buy a snootier police sergeant. But then again, not all cops are bad cops. It's like, there are good cops, there are bad cops. I think there are more bad cops nowadays because we train them wrong, but
there's a mass exodus going on with the NYPD because a lot of them are QAnon, anti-vax. It'll be interesting to see if the police department can transform itself if all the QAnon cops leave and go to Florida, and the new cops who come and actually believe in the mission. That would be very interesting to see happen.
In Richmond, we had a police chief about 15 years ago who told people, get out of your damn car.
Yeah.
We have two projects, Gilpin and I can't remember the other one. And he told the SWAT team, take off the tactical, and this is before we militarized our police. This was before 9/11. And told them they were soldiers, because a guy I work with was an MP who fought in a war, and he goes, no, you cannot treat, as a police officer, even an MP, you're serving the public. You don't treat the public as an enemy. In war, everyone is a potential danger. If you're in a foreign country at war, you have to assume, for good or bad, that everyone is a possible threat. Because you're not one of them, and you're fighting in their country. We're not and Americans have not gone and rescued a country since the Second World War, and all we did was assist them in rescuing their own countries.
Yeah.
So there's that thing, there's how they interact. And we had it, and our crime went plummeted. And we were murder cap. When I came here for college, it was us or Detroit was number one per capita murder. And it went away because the cops were policing, which is the way that the chief said at that time is, you're going to go out and be police officers, public servants. You're going to talk to, and we're going to put a little substation in the projects, and you're going to walk around, and you're going to learn everybody's frickin' name. White or black officer. You're just going to go in there, and you're going to try to make them feel at ease. And it wasn't 100% successful, no, but it helped. Yeah. But, during the pandemic, we still have those 2 housing projects, and during the lockdown-ish, as much as Virginia locked down, it got worse in there because the police weren't around. The police were going, well, we're only going to engage when we have to because of this pandemic. We're asking people to stay inside. So it was weird. But yes, it's more these cartoon characters, or not the cut and paste, here are the tropes inserted, and it's kind of lazy. I mean, I do like Rona Munro because I remember reading the book and enjoying it. I haven't read it in a long time, but I do remember it being better. It was one of those books I went, oh, I'd rather have seen this, without it being wholesale different. And I want to like this because I really love this era of Doctor Who. I think McCoy, I don't have a problem with him being the last classic Doctor. He's a good one to go out on. Yeah. They didn't give Colin time, or they didn't give themselves time to make adjustments with Colin. I mean, he made adjustments. He stopped playing the character. He started playing the character the way he wanted to play it, and script, whatever. I'm enlightened this. We're going to talk like him, and say he talks about him and Nicola Bryant when they're on Mysterious Planet. I love their relationship and the Dalek story, and in that, because it's just them playing the scene as we're best friends. Doesn't matter who wrote it, what their intent was. We were tired of that. We're going to play it this way.
Yeah, there's a hard reset.
Well, that's it for Survival. It was a mixed bag. Jason, thank you for coming on and being the first guest as this podcast takes a different shape for a short period of time, I hope. But I've got some good guests lined up, folks. I'm just going to not announce who they are and just surprise you every other week as I drop these. But some people have jumped at the chance to come on, which made me feel very good. So we're recording this 2 weeks before it will go out, which is good. That gives me time to not edit it until later and do some more planning. And I have other things to edit this weekend. But it's time for recommendations, and I'm just going to say the other one, the one I've been saying. I'm almost done. If you enjoyed the Netflix series Sweet Tooth and you like post-apocalyptic things like I do enjoy them. The original comic version is available in a compendium, which is a softbound. In comic world, it would be an omnibus, but it's 40 issues in one binding. It is wonderfully told, interestingly drawn. It is not traditional comic art, which I like, and it's written and drawn by the same person. It's an amazing, amazing comic, and I just, until I'm done, I've got about 200 pages left to do, and I'm going to knock that out this weekend. But it's really worth it. Anything by Jeff Lemire is worth checking out, especially his non-superhero stuff, which is most of what he does. It's either everyday life. He likes to do stuff about underwater diving. I've got one called The Frog Catcher that I haven't read, and he's got one called Underwater Welder. I don't know why he's into that, so I kind of want to read him to find out. But he does a lot of sci-fi and weird, and they're a lot of fun. And I've got, and in the book, about every 4 chapters, which were 4 issues, the story changes, and it's very interesting. All of a sudden, something that takes place now or a few years in the future jumps back to 1911 with no hint that it was going to happen, and it's amazing. It was like, oh wow, now we have a Frankenstein story. Where was this coming from? But it's really good. I highly recommend it. Any recommendations for us from you?
Not counting Doctor Who, I've got a lot of Doctor Who stuff going on right now between various podcasts that I either host or guest host or I'm appearing on, like this one. 2 non-Who books that I'll recommend. Number 1, Shadow of the Sith. It's the most recent Star Wars novel out in paperback. Takes place in between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens. And Rey from Force Awakens is 6 years old. Her parents are trying to get her off the planet Jakku, and Luke Skywalker gets involved in the search. Written by Adam Christopher, who is an old school Doctor Who fan. He is on Twitter. He's a fun follow, really good guy. We've had some interesting conversations on Twitter about Doctor Who stuff. He is going to be on my novelizations show coming up. He's going to be on Trap One coming up. But his Star Wars book, a bestseller, just came out in paperback, so I picked that up the other day. I'm deep into it. Really, really good. So that's my sci-fi. Other book. So I listen to this podcast, History of Literature, twice a week. Talks about the great authors, the great books, the great poems. It was a big influence on my novelizations podcast. The host of that has this thread going, and everyone who's a guest on the show will ask, what would you want to be, if you had the choice, what would be the last book that you ever read?
Ooh.
So for me, 10 years ago, I try to start a new classic book, a long one, every January 1st and read a chapter a day until I'm done. So 10 years ago, I started Count of Monte Cristo, the Dumas novel, the unabridged version. Started that on January 1st, and I was reading one chapter every day on the commute to work. And I finished on May 29th. And I posted on Facebook that night, this book is so amazing. This is everything you want in a novel. If this was the last book that I ever read, I would be happy. The very next day, I was hit by a train. It almost was the last book that I ever read. But I decided to start rereading it again this year, January 1st. But instead of only reading it on work days, because I'm only in the office rarely now, thanks to the pandemic, I'm reading one chapter a day full stop. So it's now about 90 days into the year. I'm about 15 chapters away from the end. So the Count's long, simmering revenge plan is reaching fruition. He's already disposed of two of his four enemies. He's working on the other two. It's just great stuff. So, again, if I were to pick the last book that I would read, everything you want in a book is contained in the unabridged Monte Cristo. And not only that, there's a very strong LGBT subplot, which you would not expect in a mid-19th century novel. But Dumas was well ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And it also prefigures Breaking Bad, because there's a character who suffered a stroke and has locked-in syndrome, which didn't even have a name when Dumas wrote this book. So he knew about locked-in syndrome before anybody else. It's really the first depiction of it in literature. Just an incredible book, and I'm reading a chapter a day. And then I'm reading some Doctor Who stuff and, of course, some Star Wars stuff, and I'm podcasting on the side. So I'm not reading it 2 hours every day. Just a chapter a day is a good enough pace, and really enjoying the heck out of it. I'll be talking about it some more on my show when I reach the end.
Cool. That's awesome. My brother's a big Dumas fan. He's the reader. I mean, he was the one that turned me on to certain writers and things that he knew I would like. And I've never read any Dumas. I am a huge... You watch pirate and musketeer movies in my house because of my brother Huey. And when I saw that the Richard Lester 3 and 4 Musketeers came out on Blu-ray, I was like, getting this today! Because they're great. They're great movies. And they're fun. But I'm a big fan of. There's a Richard Chamberlain version of the Count of Monte Cristo when I was a kid.
Yes.
And it's very good. Very good.
The book is not so much swashbuckling.
Swashbuckling gets inserted into his work when you film it.
A lot of it is more comedy of manners. There's a lot of scenes in salons and drawing rooms and characters verbally fencing rather than fencing with swords.
Yeah.
There is a duel, which is really, really well done, but it is not the, two people going up the stairs in the castle, the spiral staircase, having a sword fight, like the Sea Devils in Doctor Who terms. It isn't like that.
All right, folks. Well, that's it for this week. Next, in 2 weeks, me and a guest will be covering... it will be the last 2 episodes in the Further Adventures of Charlotte Pollard. And then, because me and Vic decided to do that because it takes place before Neverland, so before we did Neverland and Zagreus, we decided to do that. So I will be here with a guest discussing those 2 episodes, and we're going to have guests at least until June. And then when I get to the end, I am going to add Jodie into the mix. She's not been the Doctor for an entire cycle. So we will start reevaluating Jodie as a look back, as other episodes have, instead of as new, which will be interesting to see, what my take is compared to when I covered it when it first came out. How many years ago was that now? 5 years ago?
Oh gosh, yeah. Woman Who Fell to Earth premiered in the cinemas in the U.S. in, I think, September 2018. It's almost 5 years now.
Yeah. And we got New Who coming around. I saw, as I said in the last episode, I saw David Tennant at GalaxyCon last weekend, my time, and he said, yes, there are 3 specials. I mean, I'd never heard, I didn't see a press release, so I was like when I see a press release or a title, I'll fucking believe what I'm hearing. I don't believe any rumors because it's silly. But yeah, so it looks like 3 14th Doctor and then the Christmas special, and if the 60th is on the week of November 23rd, that means we get a month of New Who.
Yeah.
And then I don't know when they'll start the season. They're filming the season. So I'm assuming right after the Christmas one that they will just go straight into it, or, wait a very short window.
That would be nice. I know LI, who is usually a November convention, this year they bumped up to August because they were afraid they wouldn't get any guests if they happened to have their con the week of the 60th.
That's not a bad idea. I'd like to go up to that one. I've got friends, my wife is like, well, we could go to that one. We could go see Cassandra because I got, we got friends up there and family. Her sister and brother-in-law and the new niece are there. So, any excuse to go to Brooklyn again. My wife was really amazed when I said, I could live here. She goes, really? It's like, yeah. I like Brooklyn.
I've been living here for the last 15 years continuous. I was born here before that. Brooklyn is my place.
Yeah,
You're always welcome in my borough, Ross.
I would like it. I consider it my, it's our family borough because that's where my dad grew up in Flushing.
Yep.
But I liked it that one of my brothers. What about the hipsters? And one walked by me. They're middle aged, man. It's ironic you got a 50-year-old man in OP shorts. Okay.
Yep.
They just look just as stupid, but they're old. So. All right, folks, until next episode, we look forward to seeing you all somewhere in time or space.